YouTube isn't just the biggest video platform in the world, it's actually the second biggest search engine in the world too, after Google, which, as it turns out, owns YouTube. Google and YouTube are far more powerful than Facebook or Twitter, which get a lot more press because lots of journalists are on Twitter, and so it's a primary battleground for the political class to talk to itself. And Facebook was really the first big social network. It's one of the biggest still with 2 billion users. China-owned TikTok is closing fast though, with 1 billion users. But Google and YouTube not only control their own platforms, they really control so much of what you access anywhere else to other platforms. I'll Google that, just Google that, is shorthand for let me search for that on the internet. Most people don't even think of other search engines, but that in itself is a source of control. What Google puts on its first page of search results is often quite political. What it boosts and moves up versus what it suppresses or de-boosts, and they say they do that. Even what they simply refuse to show you at all. Even if you type it in the search precisely, some things Google just refuses to show. Same goes for YouTube searches. For example, if you simply type the words Rebel News into the YouTube search engine, if you're not signed in and if you cleared your cache, you get very political results. You do get a few actual Rebel News videos, but one of the very first hits is this one. Trudeau slams Rebel News. I won't call it a news organization. It's not the most current video. It doesn't have the most views. It's not by Rebel News, but it's an attack on us. Underneath that, this old one from years ago. The Environment Minister tells Rebel Media reporter to stop calling her Climate Barbie. 4 years old, but it's the CBC's attack on us. Here's one. The right perspective, YouTube, radicalization, and Rebel Media. The Listening Post. That's an attack on us from Al Jazeera. This video has very few views by contrast, like it's in the tens of thousands. It's not in the millions. It's years old. There's simply no way that would organically come up in the top 10 videos about Rebel News or by Rebel News if it weren't hand curated that way. This one from the CBC, Andrew Scheer shuns Rebel News. There are 2 legitimate Rebel News stories in the top 10 results. The rest are attacks on us, including obscure attacks with few views. But YouTube has made it that way. Anyone who Googles Rebel News or searches Rebel News on YouTube will see all the bad things people have to say about us. It bugs me, but luckily millions of people have been able to overcome the built-in bias to find us and get their news directly from us. But look at this, for example. Just for contrast, if you do the same thing and type in the name of a large left-wing YouTube channel, frankly, one of the channels we modeled Rebel News after back in the day, it's called The Young Turks. It's a left-wing site. If you do the same thing and just type in The Young Turks on YouTube, every single hit is from The Young Turks. No takedown of them or smear of them. That's the difference. You see what I mean? That's the sort of passive-aggressive stance that YouTube has had for years. I mean, starting in 2017, after the internet helped Donald Trump beat the mainstream media's bias towards Hillary Clinton, we saw the internet companies cracking down on conservatives online. Our advertising revenues fell by 85%, almost overnight, when Trump was inaugurated. Even though our viewership was actually growing, it was later called the Great Demonetization of conservative social media, and it put thousands of small conservative YouTube channels out of business. Then earlier this year, they simply cut us off altogether, but they gave us no reason why, by the way. They had no video they pointed to as a problem. They just wanted to hurt us by kicking $400,000 a year out of our budget. And remember, that was a fraction of what we'd be making if they didn't hit conservative sites the way they did. If we were of the left, we would probably be making about $3 million a year just from YouTube ads. But since January, we've had 2 swords hanging over our heads, hanging by a thread. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.